Remembering Pope Francis, one day after he made a surprise appearance at St. Peter's Square for Easter, he came out here in a wheelchair and gave a short blessing to the crowd. He was unable to deliver Mass because of his breathing difficulties, but afterwards, Pope Francis was driven through the piazza in the Pope-mobile. And I'm joined here tonight by St. John's University Professor of Theology, Meghan J. Clark, to talk about the legacy the Pope leaves behind. Professor, thank you for joining us here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Let's get right into it here. One thing we've heard time and time again is that he was the people's Pope. When you hear that, what goes through your head? Why the people's Pope?
I think part of it is a recognition that everyone who encountered Pope Francis, and even people who only encountered him at a distance, felt like he saw them, like he cared about them. He, at the center of his ministry, was always those who otherwise society ignores, those in the margins, in poverty, excluded, overlooked. I know from teaching, there's just always a sense my students have that Pope Francis genuinely cared about them as human beings, even though they'd never met him.
There you go. And Timothy Cardinal Dolan, I should say, actually spoke about how much of a teacher he felt the Pope was as well today. Social and humanitarian issues, as you've mentioned, we talked a little bit offset about this, a key component in his ministry. His final message, by the way, was a plea for peace in Gaza and Ukraine. So for you, along with him speaking with several migrants, what impacts do those messages have globally in your mind?
I think they have a big impact because Pope Francis had an ability to speak with moral clarity and, quite frankly, without a lot of politics involved. And so there is a sense that when he spoke up for the people of Gaza, and you heard and knew he was calling a parish in Gaza nightly before he got sick. There's a sense in which those who are the victims of violence feel seen and heard, but also you can kind of have possibility of conversion of heart and really cut through a lot of the noise, hopefully, for those who are making the decisions and those who have control over the weapons.
Yeah, so as you know well as I, Francis had a very inclusive way of doing things in Vatican City, something not everyone necessarily agreed with. I was out there on Fifth Avenue today, and I had a lot of people, of course, showing up to mourn. I had several people mention how maybe they didn't like the way that the last 12 years had gone with the Catholic Church, I should say. For you, is this a time when we could see some of those priorities shift for church leaders with the absence of the Pope?
I think one of the realities is that especially Catholics tend to get anxious when things change and when there's a little bit of uncertainty. And one of the hallmarks of Pope Francis is he wasn't afraid of a mess. He wasn't afraid of questions, of kind of hashing it out. In terms of changing priorities, I don't know if there'll be a change, but when those cardinals go into the Sistine Chapel and go into the conclave, a big part of what they have to do is discern what does the church need now. And one thing that's certain is that Pope Francis's priorities for migrants and the environment, those aren't likely to change.
All right. And a last question for you, and we spoke about this offset as well. A lot of conversations behind the camera here today, a lot to talk about. The Pope was a man who did a whole lot, as we all know. He was also a man who did a whole lot for women in particular. You know a whole lot about that. What are your thoughts on his efforts?
I think that one of the things that we'll be thinking about a long time is the real progress that was made under this papacy. Women were allowed to officially be lectors for the first time, officially hold offices within the Vatican structures that there was no reason that they had to be done by a priest. And at the synod that just happened in Rome, for the first time, lay women and women religious were full members and got to vote. And so you really start to see a shift in including women within the structures. Now, again, this wasn't changing doctrine, and it wasn't changing what some women are looking for in terms of bigger changes that are doctrinal, but it makes a difference.
It makes a difference in the end. A legacy that will be stamped in stone for sure, Meghan Clark, Professor of Theology at St. John's. Meghan, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming. And of course, our coverage of Pope Francis' life and legacy continues as tributes continue to pour in and people share memories of their encounters with the Pope. Stay with CBS News New York.